Hello and welcome everyone to our Saturday stream. This is our Fantasy Grounds Unity map and image creation, and I'm Josh. We do this stream every Saturday from about 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and we run to somewhere around 6 o'clock. We talk about all of the image-related news and everything that's kind of going on in that arena for Fantasy Grounds Unity, as well as do lots of demonstrations. We show off all of the art packages that we produce in-house and also how to use the software. We're actually doing a special event today with the Steam event that's going on this weekend. So we should, I'm going to be going through a little bit more of the base stuff. So you guys that have been following right along and watching and so on, we'll kind of rehash some of those base little elements. I'll be talking about some of the tools and whatnot as we progress, but we're going to still continue working on the same stuff that we have been. So we've been working on a collaborative effort with Dave's stream, creating the town of Unity. We did a regional map a couple of weeks ago, and I'm just going to pull that up now. And so here we have these here, and this is the regional map. And so this is what we've created thus far. We've done a few different elements here. And this is all created with the regional map pack that is present, that can be either purchased on our store through Steam or included in the art subscription. And we also have been working on a town map. And so we started this one last week. And we'll be finishing this up a little bit today, and we'll also add in, we're going to start to do some interiors as well. So we did this base kind of thing. We created this all from scratch in addition to that. So today we're actually going to be adding on a little bit extra over on the left side here. We're going to be doing a little bit of the waterway, adding some docks and some other buildings and so on. So that should be super fun. And again, if we could zoom right in here, you can see we have all these nice little buildings. Lots of foliage that we've added, and all of this nice textured kind of stuff in the background where we have our roads and walkways, and we'll be continuing this out as well. We'll tie right into that. Lots of cool stuff going on here. And if anyone has any questions, or if there's anything that I use a lot of shortcuts and hotkeys. So if there is something that I do that don't quite explain, please let me know, and I'll certainly take the time to do that. Excuse me while I have a little sip of my beverage there, some coffee. Great, so I'm going to close down this other image. We don't really need this, but this is the town that we're kind of working on. And we've already set up like a link to it here. So when we click on this, this is going to pop it right up and make it available to us. Here we have it here. We can close this down if we want to have like a nice clean view here. We can close this window down and this one as well. We'll primarily be working here. So I'm actually going to go into this area here. We're just going to duplicate these images on the right hand side here. So just a quick little note, we're going to be using several of our different parameters up here, these different tabs. This is the Layers tab, where we can interact with all of the separate kind of background images and whatnot, move them around and so on. So we have a question from Gus from YouTube, and it's what theme is this? So this is the Modern Dark theme. So here, let me just minimize this. These are the new sidebar changes, which are coming and are actually in test now. So if you load up the test version of Fantasy Grounds, you'll have access to these. This is a great new addition. I really enjoyed the way that this is set up. And so we have these collapsible kind of menus now. And this is going to be being pushed live shortly once everything gets all hashed out. But this is currently in test, so if you do want to check it out, you can load up the test client. Yeah, absolutely. One of the great things I like about this theme, not to get too far off, is the dice tower. So if I move this down here, it is able to be adjusted in its size. A little addition that I added into this particular theme. And so a really cool thing that I have found that I really enjoy doing is placing it directly behind my dice. And I can fill up this entire space here with this, then I'll just lock it into place. And this way, if I ever want to roll something in the dice tower, I just have to click it, and you can see that it'll immediately roll in the dice tower. So this is a nice little trick. And then if I want to roll something out in the open, then I can just grab it and throw it out, something like this. So let's dive in here. I'm going to move this over, and we're going to open up our assets over here, and I'm going to move this to the right of the workspace that we have going on here. And let's just kind of maximize our area that we can work in here. And so these tiles are actually located in the FG Art Pack 2019. Oh yeah, I like them too, Gus. I think that they are awesome. Svenster, there is a new feature that is on its way as well. I'm not sure if it's loaded up in this or not, but there will be a new built-in reference manual creator. And that is going to be a very, very cool feature that Dominic put together. And I think that it is a completely cool and wonderful new direction. And once that gets pushed out, I don't know if that's in test as well. But once that gets pushed out, I'll be going through that and showing you guys how to use it as well. It is super cool. It's one of my new favorite features that is coming to Fantasy Grounds. And it is very conceivable that that might be the direction that the story entries are going to be going in. So we shall see. Obviously, the story entries, we have, 2,000 plus products that use the story entries. So it is quite the undertaking if it was to completely be removed. But we'll see how that kind of pans out. Oh, the other thing that I did in this structure is I added a outline around the outside of these, and how I did that, and I can just kind of demonstrate this to you guys very quickly, because this is a neat little trick that you guys might want to be able to do. And so if I were to, let me just go in here, that's the module, I want the art pack. I'm going to be using some more background elements. So let's just go into those tiles because I'm going to be pulling out these and adding them into the folder down here. But anyone who is watching on Steam that is not completely familiar with the work environment over here, we can just drag and drop images from our assets window directly into the workspace and then be able to manipulate them in the layers panel. Now with this out here, if we want to create a perfect kind of outline around this, what we can do is I'm going to actually duplicate this 4 times. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll use these bottom 4 to actually demonstrate how this is going to work. So I'm going to drop these down all the way to black. And all I have to do is individually, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Control and use my arrow keys. And I'm just going to move this over. And I'm actually going to do it in a set number, right? So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to make it 5 pixels, a 5 pixel outline. And then I'm going to move it down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can see that we've already started to create this outline very easily. And now I can do this again, except I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now this might seem a little bit laborsome. Actually, what I want this to do is stay on this side. But if you could imagine painting out all of these images on the same layer, you only have to do this and it will create an outline on every single image that you've painted onto that layer. And then this one, I am going to move this one over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as you can see here, and then up. And all we have left is to fill in this little corner, and that's what this one's for. So we just move it down. And here we've created a perfect kind of outline around this using 4 duplicates all set to black. And that will do exactly the same thing as you can see that we did with this entire layer here. Okay, so here's the question. Why not use one shadow and just make it bigger, like 10.1? Well, you could do that with a single object, but where we paint it out on each individual area, we can no longer change the size of these once they've been painted, once they're stamped. And so therefore, we don't have the luxury of increasing the size of this building after we've painted it on. So when we duplicate it, what we actually do is make a few copies of it, and we can create a perfect black outline around them. The other thing is that something that has, and we can kind of demonstrate this. A square, it won't really demonstrate it. I'll bring out a different image, and we'll kind of see how this will interact. But something that has a lot of ins and outs, you won't be able to duplicate it properly by enlarging it. You're going to get some wonkiness there, and we can demonstrate that. This is actually what we're doing is manually creating how a lot of the shaders that create outlines around objects actually do it. So if you were to have a program, for example, that put an outline around an object, it actually makes, usually how it works is it makes duplicates of that object and moves it in 8 cardinal directions. But yeah, so this is the most efficient and easy way to do it. And you can see that it works exceptionally well. And if we grab this, we can move all of these at once. I'll hold down Control so it doesn't interfere with the snapping. You can see we have this nice outline around here. I'm just going to delete all of these. I just wanted to demonstrate that very quickly. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to hold down Control C and then hit Control V to duplicate it. And one more. And I'll grab these and we'll open up our little file folder down here where all of our other ground elements are. You can see we have this nice little map that we've begun to create, and we'll drop this right down in here. And now we can interact with this all at once. As you can see, we could hide all of the ground elements if we wanted to. And this is going to give us a little bit of workspace from which we can interact and build out. We're going to be doing a little bit of a water edge here to a large river. And so we'll painting that stuff right over here. And we want some space where we can put some other buildings. And we're going to be doing that a little bit differently than we created these buildings. But however, we'll be doing it all in the same areas here. And I want to be building out some docks and whatnot. So we can kind of interact with this in a lot of different ways. So we won't really pay much attention to what's over here for right now. So we'll just kind of slide it over and we'll begin to build this out. Now I could use these water tiles, but I'm not going to. I'm actually going to go into the new, let me just turn that off really quick. All right, so I'm going to go over into here, and the new Coastal Map Pack and Coastal Map Pack 2 that have recently come out. And you can see we have a new water element as well as some nice new brushes that we're going to be using to paint in our little area over here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab one of these backgrounds, and again I can just kind of pull this out, and this is going to fit right over in here very easily. Now I'm going to select my ground here, and this is going to tell me about how big my entire element is, right? So I have a couple of different options here. So what I'm actually going to do is let me hit Control C and Control V, and we'll copy this down. And then I will grab these both, and we can stretch this to the entire thing here. We want to increase it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 more. 10 more. So right now it's got a height of 30, and I'm going to turn off this, and I'm just going to stretch it down to 40. And then I can just grab these and snap it right to there. See, here we have this nice water texture. We have a weird kind of interaction between the land here, but we're going to take care of that with our brush. We're going to go over to our brush, and we have a couple of different options here. I'm not going to do like a coastal, rather rocky element here. Let me just click on this, double click on this to show you here. We have these large rocks. That's not something that I want, but I think I'm going to go with something like this, where we have this very rocky kind of shoreline. This to me feels very much like a river. So I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to move over into our painting tab. So you can see here that our tools completely change. This is all for interacting with it on a layer by layer basis. And then when we move over here, this is a new system of tools. We have a line and so on. So I'm going to grab these, and well, let's keep this a little bit separate. So I'm going to make a new folder, and I'm going to call this one water. And I'm going to drop this down right above the land. I don't want it to be beneath it. I want this to be above it. And I'm going to grab these two water elements, and I can do this a couple of different ways, but I'm actually going to hold down Shift and grab these and drop them right into this folder. And I'm going to create a new painting layer as well. And I'm going to call this one Coast. And I'm going to drop this right down into this same folder. This is going to be what I'm going to use to paint in this little area over here. So I'm going to grab this and drop it right in here. We're going to load that up. And we'll do something about this size. And what I can actually do is hold down Control now, and it will snap to my grid. And as you can see, I could pull this right down and do this. Let me just double make it. Yeah, that's where we want it. And if I want to make it straight, I can go straight down, but I don't have to do it that way. I can go kind of in and out and do that as well. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to do two passes on this. I'm going to do a base one, which I'm just going to do straight down just like this, and I'm going to double click to end it. You can see we've lined this right up with our grid, so it's perfect. We have this nice little blend here. You could say we're a little off on the top here. It looks like that our ground, let me just see here, our ground is a little bit, now let's see here. I go back into the Layers tab. Hold on, let me just turn off my phone notifications. I can also adjust it, and let me just pull this up just a little bit. It looks like, you know what we are? We're at a little bit of an angle here where we're off. But that's going to be good enough for right now. I'm not going to worry about it too much. I'm moving back into the painting area here. I can click on the image. And now holding down Control, I can use my mouse wheel to make this a little bit smaller. And I can also hold down the A key, and I can use the mouse wheel to change the opacity of this, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this a little bit larger. And I can now, again, I'm going to start at the top here, and I'm just going to click in. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start to change how this interacts here a little bit. And I'm going to make some little ins and outs. And then again, I'll hold down Control and I'll double click and just kind of make that. And you can see I'm actually going to do this a couple of different times. That's a little bit too much the same as up there. So let's just bring it out and make it a little bit smaller. And we have some nice little interactions here. That's a little bit wonky there. Let's Control Z that right out of there. And I think I'll do this here. And we'll just kind of experiment around here a little bit. Maybe I'll bring this out here. Yeah, that's getting pretty good. We're going to be adding some additional kind of elements. What I want to do is kind of make this feel like it's a little bit more fading off in here. So I'm actually going to grab this one. And we're going to hold down A, and I'm going to make this quite light here. And I'm actually going to go over the top of some of this here. I'm going to come in straight at first. This is a little bit too dark. I'm just going to Control Z and back it right out of here. And I'm going to hold down A and use my mouse wheel to soften that down even a little bit more. And I think what I'll do is I'll actually make its width a little bit less as well. Let's make it about 3 wide. That's going to give me a little bit more control over it on this side here. And I might even do this a couple of times, and this will just make it a little bit more of a transition here. You see, we get this nice little fade, and what we can do is continually drop down our opacity and just kind of paint this over here. Kind of make it feel as though this is emerging up out of the water here. And we have some other nice little effects and whatnot that we're going to be adding in to do some additional kind of water interactions here. And I'm going to be creating some docks, and we're going to do some rocks and all kinds of cool stuff. So let's jump into our decorations. I'm just going to double click on the folder, and in here we have all kinds of different elements for interacting here. But I'm specifically wanting to look at the rocks. So I'm just going to type in rock. And here are a whole bunch of different rocks that we can kind of not interact with, but use to help build out these different types of environments that we're going to be creating over here. I do want to do some large kind of rockiness out here. And we want to keep in mind that this is going to be a river, so we want to have some directional kind of movement here. We'll have it flowing in a southerly direction. But I do want to have some of these large rocks. So I'm going to switch over to my stamp tool. And I'm just going to stamp this right in here like this. And I'm not going to worry too much about this. We're going to be adding in our shadows like we did with the other elements and doing all of that stuff. So we're just going to be kind of placing this around here. And I'm going to augment this slightly. So I'm just going to use the same kind of rock here, and we can maybe even flip it. And I'm going to layer it over the top here to make a new shape. I can grab some new elements. And I just want to create like this rather large kind of element here. And I'm actually going to have it emerging up out of the sand over here, the dirt. And we'll grab one more of these, and we'll put this out here in the water. Maybe something like here. And we'll build a dock out from here. And we'll even do, what I'm thinking what we'll do is we'll build a watermill right off of these rocks and kind of have it sticking out into the water. If you guys are unfamiliar with that, they usually create a little channel that goes down through. So this would be a nice natural channel that would lend itself very well to that. And this will also allow us to kind of build up some of that cool water texture with our little splash brush and give us some sort of direction for our water to kind of flow with. And we might even make it like a lumber mill, so we could do some logs floating in the water and whatnot. That might be pretty fun. So we'll add that in as well. Great. This is pretty much done. I'm going to grab a couple of these smaller rocks, maybe some of these lighter ones. And we can just kind of place these out and around, out through here. And these kind of little incidental ones. I don't want to go crazy because not until I put down my actual structures and whatnot, what I'm going to do here. But this will just give us a little bit of idea of what might be scattered about here. And now I'm going to go into my effects. I'm going to create a new painting layer, and I'm going to drop this down in underneath this coast. Well, actually, probably want to do it. Yeah, we're going to bounce back and forth between the two because we're going to need to put some here and underneath here. Let's grab our little brush here. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to do this full-on opaque, and then I'm going to drop this down. You can see I'm just going to stamp this around, and this is going to create that little flash or splash of water here. Now this is a little bit over the top at first, and that's okay. I'm going to hold down A, and I'm going to drop down that. And we're just going to kind of fade this off, and I'm going to begin to stamp this out in this trailing kind of manner, right? So what the water is doing is it's hitting here and then trailing off on the edges of this. And we'll create a little bit of foam in and around these as well. And I can make this quite small and even quite transparent. Begin to create some really cool kind of elements in here. I'm going to do some larger ones. We have lots of turbulence where the water is interacting with these rocks. And you can see we're not going to see it over here because of our coastline. So over here we're going to do it on top here. And now what I can do is I can actually go back into my painting layer here, and I can drop down that opacity and find where it's going to work the best for me. So probably something like this. Nice and subtle. And then I can kind of jump back and forth between these two layers and kind of build up whatever elements that I want. And I actually want to do a little bit on the top as well. And again, I can hold down A and use my mouse wheel to instantly kind of control the opacity of what I'm doing. And up here, I'm going to do these larger kind of elements. And I'm going to rotate this every once in a while too. So Shift and mouse wheel, let me just make this a little bit more opaque so you can see this. Shift and mouse wheel will rotate the object that we're going to be using in the painting area. And Control will change its size. Yeah, this is really starting to have a nice feel to it. So when you're building these areas, right, where we want it to be very functional, but we also want it to look good. So we want to always keep that kind of in mind, right? Like, make sure that whatever we're putting together not only dictates the usage of the map, right? Like, so these rocks, where people could go in the game that we're creating, all of these elements, we're bringing them all together to create a very natural kind of instinctual storytelling device, right? Like, we can describe to our players where all the roads are, what's going on, or we can just show them a map. And it should instinctually kind of let the players know what's going on without it being overly complicated. So our imagery is actually another storytelling tool. It's going to allow us without having to actually verbalize it, many of the different elements. So that's one of the things that we're actually going to be demonstrating here is because of the way that we're going to have all of this water elements kind of streaming off of these rocks and moving down, move back and forth between these, and we can actually increase our opacity because we changed the opacity on the actual layer itself beneath here. But what we can actually do is, like for example, this is going to help illustrate the flow of the water. And I'm going to elongate this. Now we'll keep that the same. We'll make our height like 5, as you can see, like this. And let's even make it longer and narrower. And we'll do some on the top of these areas here. I'm just going to do like this little base here. See, this is going to help give that kind of directional feeling. The flowing of the water. And then we can bring this back to a closer to its original. Kind of just finish this out here. And then we'll begin to build all of these different elements on top. Excellent. As you can see, as we zoom out, this gives us a really good indication that the water is in motion. It might not tell them exactly which direction the water is going to go, although all of this should be built up on the front side as the water is rushing in a southerly direction. That's why this would all get built up on this side and not the other side. And we're going to add in some shadows too to help finish that off. We do have an adjust colors layer, right, that we're using to do some of our shadows. So we can instantly go into that and switch over to our effects layer. And here we've set up a mask. And we're going to be adding a new one. And so I can show anyone who's watching for the first time how to do that from scratch. But before we get into that, I'm just going to do a reveal area here, and I'm going to hold down Alt and just create some shadows off of these rocks, and even up in through these areas here. You can see that this is going to help give some shape to these rocks and how they interact with the world. And we can even do it with some of these elements of the water. And we can give this a little bit of variance, a little shadowy. And we can even, if we want to, we can do this entire area out here. And this will help determine depth. And what we'll do is we'll go in and out here. As you know, as water gets deeper, it gets darker. We can actually kind of pull this out. And holding down Shift and Alt, I can take away. So we can do little elements like this. Now you guys certainly don't need to go into this level of detail when you're doing your maps. But it is available. I like to do this kind of stuff. Oh, we have something from DJ Break Time. Let me just jump over here. Oh, hey, Drake. Let's see. You have a project you want to work on for a player's backstory? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, send me an email. I will be putting my work email at the end if you need it. Oh, that's very cool. A Kenku monk. They're like the Raven people, right? They're like the kind of like the Tengu of like the Japanese mythology. So do you think that this is, oh yeah, I think this is a really cool idea because of the whole Tengu kind of incorporation into that. The Garuda, I think it is in Tibetan. But yeah, that sounds super fun. You can do all kinds of cool stuff with it. Do you think that you're going to do the monastery as being like a, like it's all of the Raven people? Or mostly? Because you could do some really cool stuff. Like these large like nests and things. Feathers all over the place. You know, you use a lot of that like decorative kind of elements. Yeah, this is feeling rather nice. I like the way that this is interacting here. Great. I'm not going to go too much further into some of this other stuff. We might have to take it away as we build out some docks and whatnot, which we could do that just above this layer, but I'm not exactly sure. I think we'll keep it in the structures. Yeah, there's lots of cool decorative kind of elements that you could do there. Alrighty. So let's move on here. We can go back up. I believe that this is all for certain coastal kind of elements. We have all of our dock stuff here, and then the other one is mainly like ships. But there is some pre-made building structures that I think we'll grab, and we have a couple of different options. We have our watermill stuff here as well. So let's get into our decorations. We're gonna, I think I'll just type in dock, and that should bring up all of our dock elements here. And so we can start to build out these as well. So let's go back into our painting area, and let's put this in our structure. You can see that whatever elements that we need to take away from our adjust colors, and I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to rename this to be FX shadows, so that we don't have there's another adjust colors, as you can see here, and this is highlights. So let's rename this FX H lights. Oh, let's spell it correctly. There we go. And then we can, I don't have to keep turning them on and off to figure out what they're actually doing. As you can see, here's more highlights. These are the ground ones. So yeah, we should name this ground. All right. I think we're going to use some of these base little elements like this, and we can use these in a few different ways. Just kind of stamp things out. And what we'll do is we'll paint out the little area here. I think we'll do this in a couple of different layers. We have 2 layers for our structures. So we can put this in our base layer here and then kind of build on top of it. And we'll keep this at a relative, the relative size that we want it to be at in conjunction to the rest of the buildings. So let's do a little dock that's coming out this way first. And we're going to build this all the way from back here, maybe to something like this. So again, I'm going to hold down Control. Oh, we want to make sure that we rotate this if we're going to be using the line. And we'll bring it to something like there. Oh, we have changed the colors there. So let me hit Control Z. I don't think that I want this. I think I want to keep this in the same kind of color scheme that I have going here. So yeah, we've tinted that. So let's create a new painting layer. And we can just drop this in here anywhere. We might have to readjust that. Or we can drop it right down in between. I think that'll work. And again, I'm just going to come in from about here and paint that right out. And you can see we don't want these shadows to interact. And we actually want this to be a little bit different too. So I'm actually going to erase this back till we get to an appropriate ending point, something like that. That's going to work better for us. I don't want it to be halfway through some of these pylons. Oh, that's awesome, Drake. Yeah, I think that it's going to be a really cool project. And so now we begin to build out some of these base kind of structures here. And jumping back and forth here, I can now kind of interact with some of the system. I'm going to build out some more of like these. I can layer this right over the top here. Now we're going to be stamping this one. What I'm actually going to do is kind of do something like this. Let's flip it. I'm going to kind of interact, not really interact, but I'm going to just overlap these little elements and make this haphazard kind of construction where we have all of this boarded kind of element here. And I'm going to do the same up here. I'm going to keep the same kind of scale. And this is the platform by which we will be building our water mill on top of. Yeah, that will work very well. And we have other elements that we could use too, but I'm just going to go with some of the very simple kind of stuff. And we'll add in all of our steps and whatnot later. And we can move back into, let me grab this one again. And we can paint out a couple of other smaller kind of docks that come off of the main one. Make sure that we have our little line set up here. And I'm not going to worry about this. I'm actually going to build a little connection with some of these between here. And then we also have lots of pylons and posts that we can use, and some in different kind of angles and whatnot. So we can kind of put some, maybe these are older ones out here that are haphazard in the water here a little bit. Or perhaps they're used as moorings for smaller vessels. We can put some ships out here and whatnot. That'd be pretty cool. Awesome. Now I'm going to go back up into the second one here in our decoration. As you can see in these brushes, we have a whole different set of like planks and whatnot, and a whole bunch of other kind of stuff that we can kind of interact with here. But we also have a ton of different like pre-made structures that I think that we're going to be using to add things out. We also have all of the different elements that we can use to build our own ships with and whatnot. So we're going to be using a lot of those too. But I think that in the first one, there is a base building here. Yeah, I'm going to use for the mill itself. And we can put this, whoop, didn't mean to drag that out of there. We want this to be a rather large kind of structure, and I'm gonna put this in the top area up here. I think we'll add it here, and I'm gonna actually build out some more of this underneath it. I want to put it out to something like this, as you can see, like there. And then we can grab the actual wheel itself. I'm just gonna do the straight up and down one. And I think I'm gonna make it a little bit more narrow than that. Something like this. See, we'll have this nice big kind of water wheel out here. And we're going to actually paint in some water on the top of this. We'll add in some more splashes at the bottom and make this really feel like it's interacting. And see, we'll have to change the way that these shadows kind of interact. Now I can come back down in here and go back into our decorations. Grab these dock elements once again. And I think I'll grab this one. Yeah, we can do something just like this. I like how a bit of this rock kind of sticks out. We have the rock on the other side. And then we have this that's going right down in the middle. We might even add in some more structures along this as well. But this is going to interact exceptionally well, I think. So now let's go into our shadows, and we're just going to fix, I'm going to remove any of these shadows that we don't want to have. I'm just going to click on the hide area, and we can just kind of use our rectangle to remove that. And these. And we'll add in the shadows once again, but we'll wait until all of our structures are done first. But yes, this is starting to really start to come together here. Now let's build out some of these other buildings. So we're going to go into the other art package, and we'll go into this one. And you can see that these all have interiors already, but we're not going to worry about interiors right now. So I'm just going to grab some of these ones that don't. And back into our painting and into our structures area. And we're going to keep these all in about the same size as we have going on over here. So maybe we'll do a smaller building that is on top over here. Maybe a storage element or something along those lines. We have some neat little roof structures as well. And we can grab something like this. And maybe this will be like a large warehouse. We'll flip it this way. And we can do a couple of boats maybe over here. Up on the water, out of the water, and we'll do some in the water as well. We got to do all of our decorations for all of the different elements. And because we're adding this in here, we're going to be redoing all of the different outline elements to include these buildings as well. So it should work out rather well. I think we'll drop this down in underneath. It'll make things nice and easy. Yeah, this is very cool. And then we have our objects area here that we can interact with too. some larger ships that we can use. But maybe we'll grab something like this. And we'll do this on top, and then we can add in any sort of base kind of elements that we want to. So as you can see, we're really starting to build up this nice little town that we have going over here. These will be all of the elements on this side. And we can do some crossover too. We can build some of these kind of things over here as well. What I'm going to actually do at this point is, with my aspect locked off, I can begin to change these. And I'm going to do a couple of these. And you can see that you can layer these on top of each other to make them kind of feel like that they have different elements that are kind of poking out here. And if we reset this, we could even go a step further. If I wanted to undo that one, for example, and build this out here. Just something like this. It's large, kind of maybe a warehouse or something. And again, we'll have to add in all the different types of foliage and whatnot that we want to go on here. We'll be adding some stuff underneath this little, maybe this will be like a boathouse or something. So we can go back into the other coastal map pack. And we'll drop down into this area. We can type in a dock once again. And I'm going to grab some of these, and we can just build a little base underneath here. And we can also use some of the other elements if we wish. We can grab some of these. Kinds of things. Yeah, I kind of like that. Kind of parquet look there for a small area. I think it should kind of feel haphazard, don't you? Like the construction is kind of developed over time. It wasn't super thought out. And then we can grab some of these steps. Those are a little bit too large, don't you think? Should be kind of long and narrow for the scaling to be appropriate. We might even want to do these in the front of some of these buildings. Awesome. Great, now let's go into our shadows. Now we have a bunch of stuff here. We will be adding some additional kind of elements, but let's put in our base bits of shadow here. Just going to grab the rectangle and kind of do some of these elements like this. We want some cast shadows off of these elements and our boats. Now these are just little subtleties that we will be expanding on with our other elements here. But this just kind of gets everything going here a little bit. So how is everybody doing this week? I hope well. And then we can do a little bit coming off of these, and then we'll actually paint in some additional kind of elements. Yeah. I'm doing well as well. Missed a break time. I'm having a lot of fun doing this stuff. Great. And you can see that just even that small amount of shadow, and we'll add in, as we did here, all of the little incidental things. I'm still going to go in and do tons more before I hand this off to Dave. But I really feel like this is really starting to come together as a nice little town. Maybe we'll do like a bunch of forest around it or something. But you can see this natural kind of flow into these areas. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back down into our ground. And here we have our ground texture. I'm going to grab that and put that up because we want to be able to interact with this. That's the way it should be. And I want to be able to paint over some of these areas. We're going to this rock formation, these rocks can be found in the underground art pack as well. So we can paint some of this stuff out and fade this a little bit more in addition to it. But I really like this like pebbled, rocky kind of area here. And again, we're going to be adding in that outline that we created here to all of it. And I'll show you guys how you can do this on a larger kind of scale here. So I think that's what we'll do next. Let's paint in some textures. So we have some really nice textures in, well, let's go into the underground art pack first. FG Underground 2, that's the one we want. And I believe it's under effects, and here we have them, as you can see here. So let's go back, because this is a painting layer. You can tell that by the little paintbrush. And I'm just going to grab that, and you can see this is a very similar kind of texture here. And again, I'm going to hold down A and drop down that opacity quite a bit. And we want to make sure we have our stamp selected. And I'm even going to drop it down more. So let's hit Control Z and back that off a little bit. And I'm just going to kind of do this around in through here. And you can see that this is going to really add in a little bit of additional elements as this kind of fades back from the, oh yeah, doesn't that look just great? Oh, thank you so much, Smiteworks. And let me just increase that a little bit, and we can paint this through here. And you can see that this is underneath. We don't have to worry about interacting with our coast because that is a higher level there. And we can just kind of back this off. And I'm going to do a little bit in through here. And we can go through there. And you can see all of these textures as they begin to, they tell a story. We have where all of the dirt has been washed away, and we have just this kind of rocky beach area, and all of the interaction that we have between there. We could even do a little bit, oh, you know what we should do? We should do some dirt out here, maybe a tree or something. I think that would be really cool. What do you guys think? And then we'll also need to come in here and do all of our little barrels and boxes and all of that kind of interaction as well. Okay, great. Let's go into our 2019 art package. And in here we have a whole bunch of other textures that I'm going to be adding here. So there's a bunch of these kind of ones, and we want to even do some of these grass ones as well. So I'm going to grab, right past it. Grab this guy, make sure we have that selected. And again, I'm going to drop down my opacity, holding down A and using my mouse wheel. And then because we're underneath all of these other elements, we can just kind of paint this in. And what I want to do is I'm going to use this as a way to show where there's lots of traffic. I'm going to even drop down my opacity a bit more. So in front of these buildings where I put these steps, as you can see, we want to make sure that we kind of leave that open. And we're going to make these natural kind of walkways and areas that kind of interact with all of the elements that we've already placed down. And I'm not going to do any up through here, but let's drop this down even further, and I'm going to do some soft kind of subtleties here. And where these begin to overlap, where this interaction really starts to between each painted element that we're doing, going to naturally create some really cool kind of environmental effects here. Now I'm going to layer over. I'm going to go to the next grass one here. This one has a bit more visual information, a little bit more texture. And again, I'll drop down that opacity. And we can also do R, G, and B and change colors on the fly as well. And this is going to be the least traveled in areas here, something like this. And I'm actually going to add in some bushes out here and whatnot. Maybe a tree or two. And we'll turn this around and do this. And let's grab a couple of these other textures as well. And again, I'm going to hold down A and just make that a little bit lighter. And you can see where they overlap is where we start to get these really interesting kind of patterns begin to emerge. And drop that opacity right down. And you can see that this is kind of broken up ground. There's little rocks in there. And this is where the map creation inside of Fantasy Grounds Unity really begins to shine. This is where all of the other map making abilities that you see in other programs, this is the kind of stuff, the the fidelity of the image that our end product is so advanced. The things that you can do are just so, it's almost painterly, almost becomes a work of art. I mean, it is literally a work of art, but it's almost just like a painting, you know? It's like oh, so we have a question from Celestian. And so no. Nope. The question is, do the number of tiles. And so I'm not actually using tiles here. I'm painting. And the way that the system works, and this is something that's very important in Fantasy Grounds, is that, so this one image that I'm using as a texture, right, no matter if I use it in a different opacity or change its color, or how many different layers I place it on, this one image gets sent out to my players one time. And then the metadata, which is just the information telling Fantasy Grounds where to put it, what opacity, what rotation, what size, adjustments, and all of that stuff gets sent along too. So visually speaking, I could use it 1,000 times and still only a very small amount of information gets sent to my players. Excellent. Now that, it really feels like that there is a lot of different elements that that goes on through here. You know, there's so much activity. It's like the earth itself has a story to tell, the ground. Great. So now with all of this stuff done, let's jump into our shadows layer over here. And I'm going to grab this image down here. So one of the great things that we can do as well, as you can see, is we have our hotkey down here, our hotbar. Not only is this able to store all the different goodies while we're playing and whatnot, but while we're creating our maps, we can actually store images down here. So if I want to use this element over and over again, I can just drag and drop it down here. And anytime I need this, even if it's a drag and drop it up here, I can do it, right? I can just drag it and drop it right in here. It'll act like it's coming from here. I can also drag and drop it into the painting area here. So let's jump over to the shadow area. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to drop down the colors of this white. And I'll drop down this too. Let's make it like 150. This kind of white subtlety. It's just like a fuzzy brush that you might have in Photoshop. And I'm going to make sure I have my stamp tool selected. I'm going to start to paint in some of the shadows because we've already adjusted some of the color and opacity in our actual layer itself. So we can be a little bit more liberal with how we control it on this side. And again, make sure I have this stamp tool selected, and I'm just going to start to stamp in some more shadows along here. Because we're using the same image for all of the different painted in shadows and an effects layer for the rest, again, we have very little visual information that's going to be sent to our players. That's a little bit too dark, so I'm just going to drop this down. And we can add in these shadows just along here. And I'll show you a little trick that I'm going to actually use for doing these pylons out in the water here. Some of the other elements too. And I can use this shadow here. Let's be doing some bushes and whatnot growing up around these rocks. We dropped some gallows out here, which will be building some platforms. And this is going to be a long work in progress. So you guys are more than welcome. I'm here every Saturday from about 3 p.m. To just around 6. We do it 3 hours. And let's just paint in a little bit extra along these. And I'm going to do some along these elements as well. I'm not related to Bob Ross, no. But I do get compared to him quite often. So let's change this. I'm going to actually make this, see this, I'm going to make it very elongated. And what I'm actually going to do is use this to paint in some of these areas along here, like this. Help show a little bit of elevation on these. And if I make it smaller and longer, you can see it's a little bit more precise along these edges. And we can go right up along here. And you can see these really begin. Look at how much this fades in, and this really begins to stand out here. Let's do a little bit there. And right along this edge. And I'm going to do a little bit along these here. Bring it back to a more round element. I'm just going to do a little bit along these edges. I want they're a little bit more in some of the corners. It's called ambient occlusion. Light gets trapped into these little areas and can't escape. So it gets a little bit darker in these areas. And you don't want to be too precise with this, right? Like nature isn't very exact in many ways. And there are always things that we can't account for. So let it kind of happen naturally. Let these elements just create themselves. And we switch it along here. Do these. Great. And we can do some of this as well. Let me just change this. And I'm actually going to do some just out here, these like random little elements. And this is going to, and this is how we kind of created these hilly elements around here. We want to give a little bit of elevation to our terrain. We want it to feel like that it's not this completely flat surface, right? Nowhere is very flat like that unless it is been leveled out. Awesome. What a cool little town we've started to create. And now what I'm actually going to do is for these pylons, we'll change this parameters a little bit. I'm going to make it a little bit oblong. And I'm going to angle it to whatever direction I think that the shadow should be. And then I can just kind of use them on each. Something like this. And I'll even emphasize these ones a little bit. I'm going to do them like this. And I want them to kind of feel like that they're sticking up a little. Exaggerate them a little bit more. Do a little bit more in through here. And maybe just along this edge here. Cool. I'm going to just do some large cast shadows from some of these larger buildings. And we can do some from these rocks as well. And now we're going to create a new effects layer. And we're going to call this one water. I'm not going to call it water. We're going to select water. You can see where it's going to add some nice water effects here. And we're going to drop this all the way down underneath our rocks, underneath our, we're going to do it above our coast. But we can put it into this area here, and you can see it's going to affect everything. But now we're going to click on this little button called Enable Mask, and that's going to turn everything off for right now. But we're going to make sure we have Reveal Area selected, and then we're just going to select this little section in through here. Holding down Shift and Alt, I can now begin to paint out the areas that I don't want to be affected out and through here. And if I just hold down Alt, I can kind of paint in some of these areas. So I can go back and forth. And let's get rid of this a little bit. And I'm going to go a little bit beyond what I'm expecting to. And that's pretty good. That's all going to be working pretty well. And I'm going to blur that out a little so that the interaction here isn't a solid straight line. It's going to kind of blur it into the other areas. And then I'll just, I think what we'll do is move this back a little bit. It's a little bit too undulated, but we're gonna fix that in just a moment. Let's just move all of this back a little bit. Yeah, I'm going to increase the droplet here. And we'll change the speed, and we're going to drop down the intensity quite a lot. Yes, we're going to add in foam again as well. We're going to add in foam to all the different elements. And we're actually going to paint in some water in this as well to make it really feel like it's in motion. Yeah, that's right, Randy. We're going to do that too. All of that stuff. So now let's add in these. I'm going to close up these ones that we're not actually using at the moment. And we can go into our coast and painting area here. Jumping back into our coastal map pack. And in our effects, we have this wonderful little splash brush image here. I'm going to go into this layer first. This is all, I think, we're going to have to do it into our coast. So let's drop down our opacity here, and we're going to start to paint in some additional elements here, as you can see. And this is one of the great things about having that layer system, is it just allows us to paint in under these objects. Look at how great this is. This is going to create so much contrast. We'll do some larger elements like this. And I'm actually going to make it a little bit smaller and just kind of paint in some kind of turbulence. So what happens is, right, as the water rushes in, it's going to force this wheel to turn. It's going to pick up some water, and it's going to go into a circular kind of motion here, right? So if the water is heading in this direction, then the wheel is going to be spinning in the opposite direction, right? Like it's going to be pushing it this way on the bottom, but on the top, it's going to be going that way. So we're going to go into our structures and create a new painting layer, and we're going to paint in some of the water and foam and whatnot along that way. We also want to add in some elements by these docks and whatnot. And we want to do some around these pylons. And again, we can change the shape of this a bit, make this a little bit easier on ourselves. Oh, very cool. And you can see we have lots of turbulence here, and then it's going to kind of peter out and begin to get a little bit less as it comes down this way. But we'll still have some coming out from underneath these docks. And we can create some along the coastline here. And I'm just going to hit Control Z. That's a little bit much right in there. So let's go a little bit back further. Now you can really see how this is starting to feel almost painterly, right? Like it's almost as if we're just painting a picture of this rather than creating a functional battle map, right? Like, just amazing. I love this program so much. Perfect. And now what we're actually going to do is go in and let's paint some on in through here as well. I'm going to create a new painting layer. And we'll call this water. But we're going to put this in our structures area, right above all of these other things. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use this same brush. Let's increase the opacity, right? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to select one of these colors, and I can grab my color picker, and we have a nice little eyedrop tool. So all I have to do is select this, and I can come in here and pick any one of these colors that I wish. And I can get, if I want to, I can zoom way in and really be exact. So let's say, well, let's grab something like that, and okay. Because my image is white, as you can see, it is going to duplicate that exactly. And again, I'm going to drop down my opacity. And I'm just going to start to paint in these little elements in here. So I'm going to be a little bit cautious, but then we're going to do some of that white kind of foam on top. And what happens is water gets trapped in these little compartments. And this is just going to be our base. We're going to actually add in some additional elements, right? So we're just going to do a little bit of this base color in each one of these. And we don't have to be super exact. We can just kind of play around here a little bit. And again, we're going to add in some little shadows and whatnot and do all of the stuff there. And now I can open up this and I can mess with this directly by moving everything to the right to lighten it. As you can see. And I'm going to drop down my opacity here. Excellent. And now I'm going to move it all more to the right. And again, we can drop down the opacity. And we might want to add a little bit just on this edge here, where it's spilling back over the edge. And we might even want to do some on this edge too, where it's picking up that water. And create some additional kind of turbulence. And here, now we're going to move it all the way to the right here. So now we just have the white area here. And I'm just going to do a little bit more. And let's drop down that opacity even further, where we can create this kind of turbulence. And now I'm actually going to go into the layer here, and I can open up the color picker for this layer in itself, and I can adjust this water even further to really blend it in to the amount that I think is appropriate. And that is quite perfect, I think. I think that that works exceptionally well. Oh, you can hear it turning? Oh, excellent. Just what we wanted. That is just what we wanted. Oh, so it's 4:30. I'm going to take a short break. We're about halfway through the stream. So I will be heating up my coffee and refreshing my water. So we'll just be a few minutes break while I stretch my legs, and we'll be coming right back and diving back into some more. We got to do a lot of more stuff in through here, adding in a lot of additional elements. I want to do some more foliage. I think we're actually going to paint out some ground out here, maybe put a little tree. I think that would be awesome. We can do some ships out here, a lot of other stuff. So stay tuned. I will be right back. Thank you all for joining me today, and we'll see you in just a few moments. All right, and we're back. Thanks everyone for hanging out and waiting for me there. Hopefully it wasn't too long. And we'll get right back into this. So here we have objects, but our painting layer, right? Our objects aren't going to show up if we paint them on top of our docks, because this is where our docks are. We want that to happen. So we have a couple of options here. We can either move our objects, which is all of these items out here, all of these incidental items. We can either move that on top of the docks and put it into our structures folder. Can you not hear me? You should be able to hear me. Let me just see 1 second here. Is there anyone out there? Okay. Great. Okay, great. Just checking, making sure. We want to make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row here while we're doing this. So we can do a couple of things. We can. I'm actually going to rename this so that we know it, and we're going to call this docks. But probably the easiest thing for us to do is just to move this, and we can just drop it right in here, in between these. Oh, thanks, Francie, for letting me know. So that we can move it right into here. That way we don't have to worry about any of the interactions, right? We can keep our objects all in the same layer. It's not going to affect how it's going to be seen out through here. So here we can start to add in all of these cool little decorations and whatnot. And so we have some neat awnings and whatnot. We can set up some kind of cool stuff over here. We're actually going to be building, probably not this week, probably next week, we're going to do a little market around the interior of this place. So we'll set up some map pack. We actually have some like bins of food